Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford will continue to stay hot, but Vinny thinks Justin Fields' fantasy outlook is bleak for this weekend. We dig into our quarterback and tight end rankings for week 6 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
We are going to start our week 6 positional rankings, starting with quarterbacks and tight ends on today's show. Now, there's only 2 teams on bye this week. That's the Texans and the Vikings. So when it comes to tight ends and quarterbacks, not too big of hits there with CJ Stroud and Dalton Schultz and then Carson Wentz and TJ Hawkinson. But let's start with the top of our quarterback rankings for this week. And I'm starting right off the top with Baker Mayfield. He has been really consistent, on fire. He's the quarterback 5 so far in points per game this year, but I really like his matchup against the 49ers defense. And you have Baker at 6. So obviously, if you have him, you're going to keep rolling with him. Josh Allen, I know it hasn't been like the most dominant fantasy year from him, but you keep rolling with him. You have him at 1. I have him at 2. Jalen Hurts, you have at 2. I have at 3. Dak Prescott has been killing it. You have him as your quarterback 3 on the week against the Panthers. I have him at 5. Now, Justin Herbert is a guy we need to discuss, though, because he has been struggling, but we have him ranked back up at the top. I have him at 4. You have him at 7. It's too good of a matchup against the Dolphins to consider benching him, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think he rebounds big time here. I mean, the Dolphins have just been hemorrhaging points. I mean, Bryce Young didn't put up the biggest game. He did end up with 2 touchdowns, however, in that game last week. The Dolphins, again, give up the points. We saw it even late against Justin Fields to some degree in that game just a couple weeks ago. Their defense stinks. They really can't stop much of anything. You also figure the Chargers are going to have to open up the passing game a little bit without Amari and Hampton now on IR. That's a bummer for their offense, but that should make them want to be more aggressive with Justin Herbert. The matchups for all 3 receivers are excellent. Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen, and Ladd McConkey. So they could all do some damage in this game against that Dolphins secondary. Now, but I think Justin Herbert, look, he can go to mini slumps. We've seen it before. This is one of them against the Giants and Commanders. I think he breaks out of it. Speaking of Commanders, and Michelle, if you're watching on YouTube, has a Commanders jersey. Now, Jayden Daniels, there was some question and disappointment of Jayden Daniels last week with the numbers not living up to those very high expectations coming back from injury. But now it's game 2. It's the Bears. If you recall, last year was the wild game where he had the Hail Mary touchdown and the kind of a little bit of a coming out party to be a dominant fantasy force last season. Does history repeat itself with Daniels having a big game? And what does that mean again for Caleb Williams in their second career battle in 2 seasons?
Yeah, we're both saying Jayden Daniels, come on, get it together, have one of your big blow up games because it's been a solid year for Jayden Daniels in the 3 games he's played. Hasn't been like a massive disappointment, but those 25, 30-point games just haven't been there yet. And I'm wearing a Jayden Daniels jersey just so to give him some good luck and say this would be his big first game of 2025. I have him ranked as quarterback 6. You have him up at 4. So we're both believing on him to have a good game. The Bears started really terrible on defense the last couple of weeks before their bye, though. They picked it up and stopped both Dak Prescott and Geno Smith. But I think this should be a high-scoring game. And that's why we also I have Caleb Williams ranked top 8. I have him as my quarterback 8. You have him at 12. But, I mean, he's had 3 really good fantasy weeks so far this year. 2 really good ones, 1 solid one, and then 1 bad one. But I just think Caleb Williams is looking a lot more composed. And with this bye, hopefully he and Ben Johnson could even get on more of a schedule going into week 6.
Yeah, you just have to be patient a little bit with these offenses. The offenses tend to be behind the defenses early in the season, especially the teams incorporating new offenses. I think we've seen it with the Jaguars. They're slowly putting things together. It's not pretty yet, but Trevor Lawrence is compiling. We saw that on Monday night. He's doing better. Brian Thomas is slowly getting in the flow of what we're used to. And that happened to the Bears, too. It took a couple games, right, for Rome Odunze to emerge as the go-to guy. I think he could have a big week this week. So that's already opened the door for Caleb Williams. You can throw in the Commanders. They do give up a lot of plays to receivers all over the field. Odunze, you can move in the middle of the field. They struggled last week with Lad McConkey. So if you work the middle of the field, you can burn the Commanders and their secondary. So I do like Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels. If we like him, Caleb Williams is going to have high volume this week because the Commanders probably slow down the running game of Chicago.
Now, Patrick Mahomes, we haven't mentioned. I do have him a little bit lower this week against Detroit at 11. You have him at 5. He has been doing very well for fantasy. This
Yeah.
hasn't been like it was like the last couple of years. He's the quarterback 3 on the year behind only Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson in points per game. So if you have him, I am a little bit worried about this matchup. I think this could be, a bit of a struggle, but at the same time, it should be there should be points to be had, and you're playing them if you have them. We both have Drake May in our top 10 against the Saints. You have him at 8. I have him at 9. But one guy I want to talk about, this is the first time I ever ranked him close to this. It's Matthew Stafford at quarterback 10. You have him at quarterback 9. He just had a really big week against the 49ers last week with 25 and a half fantasy points. This is now 2 straight good weeks for fantasy for him because in week 4, he had 27 points. And now he gets the Ravens, who apparently anyone could do anything against because CJ Stroud had a massive fantasy day against them in week 5. They're just so banged up and their defense is performing so terribly. I mean, I don't know how Stafford doesn't have a huge game in this matchup.
Yeah, Puka Nacua can destroy this matchup. Devontae Adams can do it. It really just comes down to, are the Rams ever going to step off the gas, right? Because they can also run well on the Ravens, but it didn't stop CJ Stroud last week. I think you want to put away the Ravens. It's a road game, right? You're still going to be a little fearful of a comeback, and you want to make Derrick Henry useless in the second half in terms of just needing to be a garbage player on this team. So the faster you can do that, build a big lead, that's going to make Henry ineffective. So I think you do need to pour on the points. I don't think the Rams necessarily are going to be conservative in any way. I mean, the Kyron Williams fumbling might give them pause, right? And Sean McVay's in his head saying, hey, I should have maybe thrown there. So in his whole persona, you might be thinking, okay, I got to throw 60% of the time, build a lead that I'm not going to blow in this one, or there's no chance for the Ravens to come back. So I think the best way to do that is to pour it on with Puka and Devontae Adams. And again, those are the tickets. This is why I like Stafford a lot before the season as a sleeper. Those two guys together are incredible. And since the Eagles duo is not doing it, and we're really not seeing it for the Bengals, this is the best duo in the NFL in fantasy right now.
Yeah, apparently. All right. We're going to take a quick break and we'll get to the rest of our quarterback rankings right after that. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, easy, and honestly a great way to follow along with football. Just download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL, for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, let's continue with our quarterback rankings. And Jordan Love, you have at number 11, actually ahead of guys like Caleb Williams and Bo Nix and Justin Fields, who we'll get to in a little bit because we're very different on Fields this week. But Jordan Love, he gets the Bengals. You have him at 11. I'm right behind you. I am at quarterback 13.
Yeah, I think with him, you just look at the matchup. I mean, Jared Goff could have had a massive day there against the Bengals defense. I mean, he had his receivers working. He had 2 tight end touchdowns in that game. That's where they came from. And David Montgomery tossed another one there. So when we look at that, look, Jordan Love should move the ball at will here. Josh Jacobs should have a big game. The running game should facilitate a lot of things. We know they can find touchdowns. So look, Romeo Doubs is probably not going to score 3 times, but he can spread the ball around. Tucker Kraft has a fantastic matchup this week, so that's a ticket. And Jordan Love can do some damage with his legs also in this game. So again, Love is a start this week for sure. I mean, the Bengals, again, defense has been atrocious. They probably wish they still had Lou Anarumo, who's helping the Colts play a lot better. But yeah, the Bengals just do not have a lot going on. And when their offense stinks and turns the ball over, more opportunities for the other offense to score. And that's what you're going to see in Lambeau Field. The route could be on. Love and Jacobs should have a big chunk of that.
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals have let Bo Nix scored 26 points in week 4. Goff had 20, but with 3 passing touchdowns. And, teams are just scoring on them like crazy. Bo Nix had 3 touchdowns on them. Carson Wentz had 2. Trevor Lawrence had 3. So, yeah, you're going to play Jordan Love. That's a good play there, unless you had one of the top guys we talked about this week. Now, what are you expecting from – I have 2 guys I want to talk about. It's Bo Nix and Daniel Jones, right? With Daniel Jones, he started off on fire, and you have Daniel Jones at number 10 this week. I have him at 12, but are we just still holding on to those first couple weeks a little bit too much for this fantasy value? I mean, the Colts offense has been on fire, but the first 2 weeks, 29 points, 23 points, but since then, 15.8, 10, 16.7 fantasy points. He had 5 touchdowns over the first 2 games and only 4 touchdowns over the last 3. Jonathan Taylor, though, just keeps stealing all the touchdowns. I do think it could easily go back to Daniel Jones getting some more in the end zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be up and down with teams that can score a lot and score the way they want. It's going to be going nuts in terms of if Jonathan Taylor scores 3, then you're going to not have a lot, but he still managed 2 for a floor, right? So he had a decent floor there, even without running much last week. I mean, it wasn't spectacular, but in some leagues, when you get the 6 points for passing touchdown, you got 20 points out of him. It's not great, but there are a lot of QBs who are struggling and are melting down, and you don't necessarily have that consistency elsewhere. So I look at this Cardinals matchup. There's nothing really that scary about it. It really comes down to if he got 1 more touchdown and Taylor had 2, then you're talking about Daniel Jones has another great fantasy game. I mean, sometimes this happens, right, where we're just looking for pay dirt, and that really determines what kind of fantasy they have. I think you also came into play with Jared Goff, right? You could have had a big day, but he lost one with his running back, David Montgomery, throwing one, and then Montgomery ran one in and Jacobs ran one in. So, Jahmyr Gibbs. So when we look at all that stuff, it really comes down to touchdowns. But do I think he's going to play well and there's a possibility to have a big game? He's a better quarterback at home. Yeah, absolutely there against the Cardinals this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's a good play this week, a solid play. Now, Bo Nix, this is just where he's going to kind of live for me. I have him at quarterback 14. You have him at 13. He's had an up and down season as well. One big game in week 4 against the Bengals because the Bengals defense stinks. Last week against the Eagles, it was a solid 17.9 points. Didn't kill you. 2 bad weeks this year. Another solid one in week 2. It's just been up and down for Bo Nix, especially on the road this week. Even though the Jets defense is very beatable. We just saw Dak Prescott put up 4 touchdowns in New York this past weekend. I don't know. They were also able to hold Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, and Tua to very few fantasy points. I'm mixed with Bo Nix. I think you can start him, but I'm not dying to get him into my lineup.
Yeah, I think he's a good option this week if you're in 2 QB leagues or super flex and you're trying to replace Stroud or Wentz or needed a body to go in there. But Bo Nix can also be valuable in deeper leagues, and partly because the Jets defense is atrocious. And the game is in London, so it's not really a road game for Bo Nix where he's a little bit worse. It's kind of a neutral site. Well, it is a neutral site, but it's not going to wear him down too much where he's going to face a hostile environment at all. Like there'll probably be a lot of Broncos fans making the trip over there. So, I mean, the Jets, I don't know if the Jets fans would want to travel for an 0-5 team, but they could. But when you look at the Broncos, again, there's going to be some momentum with this offense. They're starting to feel it. Sauce Gardner, he's not scary anymore for Cortland Sutton. There's a lot of weapons on this team. So it could be one of those spread the ball around to the tight ends and wide receivers type production. Nix can also, I think, run for some yards. So Dak Prescott, again, if he has half the game of Dak Prescott, he's going to be fine this week. And again, Bo Nix comes into the conversation, but he's just like he was as a rookie last year. He's there, he scores. We don't always think about him, but he's there if you need him. If you need a high floor quarterback, you're dealing with injuries, there's the guy for you.
Now, the guy that's playing on the opposite side, Justin Fields, this is our biggest disparity in our rankings. I have Justin Fields as quarterback 7. You have him at 18. Now, I understand the matchup isn't great against the Broncos, but that's why I have him at 7, right? I mean, he's a quarterback 4 on the season, and that's what a huge stud game in week 2. But the other games that he's played this year, the other 3, 29.5 points, 27 points, 26 points. He doesn't look good as a quarterback. 100% will give you that. And maybe he gets benched on the road. But when he plays, he's going to have garbage time. And he just keeps putting up points. Yeah, the Broncos might beat up on the Jets with J.K. Dobbins. And maybe Bo Nix gets a touchdown or 2. But there'll be that garbage time for him to get his points like there was last week.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit worried. Again, this defense is, I think, the best when it comes to the pass rush with Nick Bonito. He got going last week against Jalen Hurts. I know Hurts was able to do some things and compile, but it took a Saquon Barkley long touchdown after catch and some things, right? It had to mishmash it all together. And you also have his best receiver, the guy he's going to look to a lot, going to be covered by the best corner in the NFL, Pat Surtain, too, probably. So if Garrett Wilson's bottled up, and I don't think this is the greatest matchup over the middle either for this team, I think it's going to be hard for Justin Fields to get that garbage. It might end up being a lot like that Bills game just a few weeks ago. So that's what my worry is in this one, especially not at home. If it was at home, in true home game in New York, maybe I'd feel a little bit better, but I can't this week.
Yeah, I mean, they let Daniel, the Broncos haven't been completely shut down against quarterbacks. Daniel Jones had a good fantasy day against them, 23 points. And then Jalen Hurts had 20 fantasy points against them last week. And the other quarterbacks they faced were Cam Ward and Jake Browning for 2 of them. And then Justin Herbert, who is held by them, but he still put up 300 yards against them. He's just struggling to throw many touchdowns. And that's just not just against the Broncos. It's been the last 3 weeks for him. So I'm not like extremely worried about this matchup like you are, but quarterback 7, I think if you have him, I don't know how you go away from the points he has been putting up. Now, another guy I want to discuss here to finish up our quarterback rankings is Jared Goff. He has to go play in Kansas City in a primetime game. And we know Goff, on the road, it can be dicey, but he put it together last week on the road. That was against the Bengals defense, though. The Chiefs did lose last night and allowed the Jaguars to score 31 points, allowed Trevor Lawrence to put up a really big fantasy day with 26 points. But a lot of that had to come on his legs with Trevor Lawrence. It was 54 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, only 1 passing touchdown, 221 passing yards. Goff's not getting you those rushing yards or rushing touchdowns, right? So what do you think about Goff? Because you have him ranked pretty low at 21.
Yeah, that's a big source of the Chiefs' opponent's production, the running. I mean, I mentioned it. I mean, it was a layup for me. Like I said, 10.5 rushing yards for Trevor Lawrence. I was just like, yeah, I was in cruise control, chilling when he was like getting close to like 70 and 80. He was pushing it there with his rushing ability. But yeah, they struggle because the nature of their defense kind of turns around, opens up some gaps to do that. And Jared Goff is never going to take off and run. And another thing we talked about, Jameson Williams, he's struggling. The Chiefs, look, they gave up a few longer shots they would not have liked to against the Jaguars that cost them in the final drive, but I think they can contain Jameson Williams. They can get after it a little bit with the pass rush. They also have been surprisingly bad or more vulnerable against the running in general, not just quarterbacks, but running backs. So bread and butter of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery should be a lot what they do to grind this game out, right? I don't know if it's going to be the shootout everyone expects, right? The 2 defenses are playing really well here. So, again, Goff not being able to run, I think, really hampers him in this matchup against the Chiefs because that is, again, they really struggle with mobile dual threat quarterbacks, but not a quarterback of this nature.
Yeah, some guys you have ranked over Jared Goff or Mac Jones at quarterback 14, Bryce Young at 15, Trevor Lawrence at 16. So you're very low on Goff. I do have those guys ranked a little bit under Goff for this week, but I do like Mac Jones as well. We both have him ranked pretty high for Mac Jones, right? You have him at 14. I have him at 16 against that Buccaneers secondary that's really banged up, and just let Sam Darnold put up a big game against them. But that will be it for our quarterback rankings. Let's transition to our tight end rankings. And we have a new tight end 1 at the top that we're going to stick with heading into week 6.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. As of August 2025, from footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players that grind through and give us the fancy points we need, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, let's reveal the top tight end of the week, and it should not be a surprise if you've been paying attention the past 2 weeks and really the entire season, as he's been a target monster for the Dallas Cowboys. It is Jake Ferguson, and he's scoring touchdowns. We're excited. He had 1 there in week 4. Then he had 2 in week 5. Will he go for 3 against the Panthers? We'll see, but they do not cover the tight end well. Darren Waller had a nice game against them last week. So it all lines up perfectly for Jake Ferguson to keep it going this week. And look, we said the middle, that place, right? 10 to 12 was the way to target tight ends. And Jake Ferguson 1, Tyler Warren 3. That's really coming through this season.
Yeah, Jake Ferguson, like you said, tight end 1 this season. He's averaging 13.1 points per game. The next closest tight end that's played at least 3 games this year is averaging 11.3, and that's Dalton Kincaid. So almost 2 more points per game than any other tight end. He has 48 targets, one of just 2 tight ends to have more than 35 targets on the year. It's Trey McBride and him. Trey McBride at 42, so 6 more targets than even McBride has. And the last 4 weeks, I mean, it's just been on fire. And with CeeDee Lamb out, it's just not gonna change with his targets. And the Panthers are allowing the 2nd most points per game to tight ends this year, the most receiving yards. So it's just a killer matchup as well. Then at tight end 2, it's a guy that also has a great matchup, and it's your tight end 2, Tucker Kraft. It's my tight end 3. I do have McBride still there at number 2. But really, with Kraft, I do think he's overrated in fantasy. He's only had 1 good game out of 4 this year, but the matchup is too good to ignore. The Bengals are allowing the most points per game to tight ends this season. Sam Laporta just had his first big game of the year against them last week. So I do think Tucker Kraft has a really, really good game in week 6.
Yeah, this is the guy that we didn't love. He was in that muddled middle with Evan Ingram and David Njoku early, and like he's exceeded expectations to some degree, but he's going to be up and down, right? With the use of him in the Packers offense, like it can be Romeo Doubs week, it could be just random guys going off. And I think that's the struggle I have with the Packers offense when you're not getting to Josh Jacobs and Jordan Love distributing the ball. It's a little hard to read. But Tucker Kraft, the Bengals stink against the tight end. This is the time of year, folks, where the stats against the tight end start to not just become what they've given up, but also the trend that you can follow for a bunch of the year. And the Bengals absolutely cannot cover the tight end. Just watch every game. The guy's running wide open and free. And Sam Laporta, look, we loved him last week. He came through. Kraft gets a little bit out of his slump as well. He was hurt, remember? So I think getting the bye week and coming back healthier is also going to help.
Yeah, I'm right with you there. Now, Tyler Warren has been fantastic. You keep playing him. I have him at 4. You have him at 3. You have McBride at 4. And then you have Travis Kelce at 5. Now, he did have a good game last night. I probably need to move him up. It's good to see that he was actually utilized. 7 receptions, 61 yards, and a touchdown. So you're feeling really good about Kelce heading into week 6 as your tight end 5 against the Lions. I have him at 11, but I'll end up moving him up a couple spots by the weekend.
Yeah, I think he's scoring touchdowns, and this offense has come to life a little bit with the Chiefs. I mean, they're moving the ball and putting points. I mean, Kareem Hunt had a couple touchdowns, but Patrick Mahomes, they're getting in the red zone a lot all of a sudden when they were struggling with this. So, and they're scoring in the red zone. They used to settle for a lot of Harrison Butker of late, right? But now they're finishing drives. Kelce is still a good threat to catch a touchdown. Look, Mark Andrews in a really tough spot. Kelsey, however, not. He's still an okay player, and he's just solid. He's not going to be spectacular every week, but you can definitely play him.
Yeah, Mark Andrews, I don't even think like he'll have a couple more good games this year, but I don't want to keep riding
No,
that and hoping
you
I hit
can't.
on it. So like, yeah, I don't want to play him whatsoever. Now, Dalton Kincaid has been fantastic. You have him at 6. He'll be my 6 too, because right now I put in Brock Bowers, but the latest reports on Brock
Yeah.
Bowers is he's week to week. So it looks like he probably won't be playing this week. Kincaid's been great. Keep playing him. Darren Waller, since he's come back in the NFL, has been balling out and they need him. So I still have him at tight end 8. I think he's a very good play. You have him a little bit lower at tight end 3. Hunter Henry, we're pretty similar on 9 and 11 for us against the Saints. But then we get to my number 10 tight end, and a big difference here. It's another Jet player, so it kind of makes sense, right? I have Mason Taylor at tight end 10. You have him at tight end 17. And this is my thing I have to ask you. If you're saying, okay, his best target, Garrett Wilson, is going to be covered by Pat Surtain, Fields has to throw to someone. And that someone is going to be Mason Taylor, because Mason Taylor is every single week his targets have increased. He went from 6 in week 3 to 7 in week 4 to 12 targets in week 5, 9 receptions, 67 yards. He has yet to score a touchdown, but 65 or more yards in each of the last 2 weeks. And I just cannot ignore those type of targets coming from this rookie tight end that seems to have really made his name in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that you can hope for is he could definitely score in this game, and that could really bump him up. Might be the difference of does he score. Again, I'm just not high on the Jets at this point. You're giving the Jets fans some optimism, so that's nice of you this week,
Oh, they're not
Michelle.
going to win, and they're going to be bad, but
But
the
they
fan.
need something. They need something to like here. They need something to put their hat on to say, "Oh, Mason Taylor could be a future star of this league." Right? They need something. Their defense stinks. Look, I like all your theory on this. I'm just a little bit afraid that the Broncos could steamroll them. I'm just getting after beating the Eagles last week. Maybe they'll just like, all right, we're ready to take on anybody and just fly all over and beat this team badly. So I'm just a little concerned that could be an absolute mess for the Jets. And it's nothing against Mason Taylor. It's nothing against Justin Fields. It's just some of the things that are going to maybe could potentially collapse around them. I want them to be decent. I don't know if they can. Like in retrospect, I should have probably put him ahead of Mark Andrews, so I don't want any part of this week. But I would have, at the highest, maybe I was a good 14. So then if you're looking at 10 versus 14, it's not so bad. There's just a couple guys I like more this week. I mean, we both like David Njoku pretty high with Dillon Gabriel. We'll get into that in a moment. But I do like Brenton Strange. The Seahawks have allowed the most fantasy points to tight end, so I do like that. Hunter Henry has a great matchup in New Orleans. On the other side, Juwan Johnson. The Patriots cannot cover the tight end as well. So there's just a few handful of guys with better matchups that I like there with Mason Taylor. I like Taylor the player. I just like the matchups of these tight ends a little bit better when all things are considered, all things are equal. But David Njoku, again, an interesting guy because we'd written him off. We were like Harold Fannin Jr. is arriving. Then the change of quarterback came, and Njoku was balling out for his guy, Dillon Gabriel. So you saw him. He was so excited about this. So maybe David Njoku back to being a regular play.
Yeah, and Harold Fannin Jr. was in on it too,
Yeah,
right?
he scored. Yeah.
You can play both of these guys. We both prefer
Yeah.
Njoku, but I just because it feels a little bit safer. But I do think Fannin Jr. is a solid sleeper type tight end play this week. Steelers giving up the 4th most fantasy points per game to tight ends this year. It was really only Hunter Henry that had a big game. AJ Barner was able to score a touchdown against the Steelers too, but they haven't really played many other tight ends this year worth noting. So I do think Njoku's a good, solid play. I'm not with you on the Juwan Johnson and Brenton Strange plays this week. You have them. You have Juwan Johnson at 10, Brenton Strange at 12. I have them much lower at 17 and 20. Juwan Johnson just his targets have died off the last couple of weeks. He only has 7 targets, 5 receptions over the last 2 weeks combined. Hasn't scored a touchdown since week 2. And the fantasy points have just dwindled completely. 8 fantasy points, 4 fantasy points, 2 fantasy points. So I get it. The Seahawks are a good matchup, but then at the same time, it's like, okay, they allowed Kittle to have that first big drive. They allowed Kate Otten to have 81 receiving yards in week 5, but I mean, they held Trey McBride to just 52 receiving yards on 11 targets. They held Juwan Johnson to just 51 yards on 8 targets. And just, Strange isn't getting those type of targets either. And the fantasy points just haven't been there for Strange this year. Has not hit 10 fantasy points in any game this year. 7 or fewer in 4 of the 5. He had a couple games with just 3 or fewer points. So off of Strange, and I don't want to play Juwan Johnson really either.
Yeah, I think I trust a little bit. This is more coming to the play callers, Liam Cohen and Kellen Moore here, that they're going to look at the matchups and look at what I've seen here with the way the Patriots cover tight ends. They just gave a 100-yard game to Dalton Kincaid, the Seahawks. I mean, they put Cade out into life last week. So I don't know exactly if I trust the player, but I trust the system and the way the matchup is going. And that's kind of where I'm going at with these players. So again, these tight end numbers, they exist for a reason. They're either because the team cannot cover with the linebacker and safety, or that they have the corner so good. When those two things merge, then you feel really good about somebody. So again, we'll see how it works out here between I'm very intrigued to see how Strange, Johnson, and Taylor do this week. I don't know. That could be the only person in America looking at those 3 tight ends so closely this week, but I will be and looking at it. It's much like my Prize Picks guys.
Yes, absolutely. That will be fun. That will be it for today's episode. Tomorrow, we'll get to our running back rankings for week 6. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen of the day. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.